You're blessed just to walk through those gates. You're blessed to sit in those tiny little stands. You're blessed.
The people feel terrible inside the house. Look at the television, they have good program, and say, go on to Fenway Park. Go on over there, take the families with a lunch and come over here. The kids have peanut butter sandwiches and throw away the garbage and buy peanuts, hot dogs.
Hey, Fenway, what dog?
Right here, right here, right here.
Hey, Fenway, what dog? $2 for Yankee fans.
This is amazing. I am so enamored with this.
It's just tradition. You came here when you were a little kid, you saw the Green Monster.
This is baseball in the city, right in the crux of the city. Everybody's circled around it. I mean, it's old, it's got history.
It's something in my heart about it. I don't know what it is, but it's very special to me.
You got the hot dogs, you got all the places to eat, you got everybody just walking around and tailgating, and you know, it's a beautiful day out, and even if it's a wintry day out, it doesn't matter. It's just an amazing place.
I've been coming for maybe my whole life, 8 years, and the atmosphere is so great. So many people, the fans, just the game, it's awesome.
Peanuts, cashews, pistachios, super pretzels over here. Fresh roasted peanuts. Look before shopping, people. Fresh stuff here.
Fenway Park was my first home in baseball. It was the place where my dreams came true.
It's magical because of anybody that walks in there, the first thing you do is you look left to see the wall.
Many are called, but few are chosen. And I was one that was chosen.
When you walked into Fenway, it kind of gave you some chill until you could get up and move around a little bit, and you'd start warming up, and the atmosphere was so good, and the fans were so good.
I used to come early to the ballpark and walk through the stands, talk to people and stuff like that. I know every guy in the ground crew. So Fenway Park was my life.
Fenway Park is paradise. Fenway Park is baseball.
This park's been around since, I don't even know when, you know? 1912. See, this guy knows. He was probably around back then. It's a beautiful place. I mean, come on.
That's what he's talking about.
See, this guy knows. He agrees with me. I'm right. You can't beat Fenway Park, and everybody knows it.
Once upon a time, there was a place and a city where Fenway Park did not exist. And once, across all the distant decades, baseball was played without a club called the Red Sox. Back in 1901, when the American League was formed, the hometown team was named the Pilgrims, and they performed at the old Huntington Avenue grounds, located less than a mile from Kenmore Square. The Pilgrims played on a field deep with mud and soot. Admission was 25 cents, if you indeed had a quarter. If you didn't, so what? You just showed up anyway. It was the era of the dead ball, a time when a long fly ball to center would elicit oohs and ahs from the assembled, who, incidentally, often stood and watched from the outfield grass. The first World Series took place on the Huntington Avenue grounds. This is where the sporting world first heard of the town team's pitching phenom, a strapping 6-foot 2-inch right-hander who could throw a ball faster than a locomotive or an automobile. His name was Cy Young, and he was truly amazing. Today, his record still boggles the baseball mind. From 1890 until his retirement in 1911, Young won 511 games, struck out 2,803 batters, started 815 games, completed 749 of them. The Pilgrims won that first series in 1903. Their victory gave legitimacy to the upstart American League.
They had beaten the National League's best,
the Pittsburgh Pirates in 8 games, and Cy Young won 2 of the 8. That World Series also showcased a loyal group of Pilgrim fans who called themselves the Royal Rooters.
When the Boston American League team was created in 1901, the Royal Rooters changed their allegiance rather quickly and dramatically. They were angry at the National League team for several reasons, one of which was they felt they were being gouged for tickets. They had to pay the ungodly price of 50 cents for a grandstand seat to see the National League team, and the American League promised 25-cent baseball.
Fiercely loyal, the Rooters would march to the ballpark accompanied by a brass band. Their fearless leader, a local bartender named Michael McGreevy, would settle any pregame arguments by pounding his fist on the bar and yelling out, "Nuff said." This habit would earn McGreevy a nickname and the Rooters a raucous reputation.
There was very much an Irish-American tinge to the group, that it was a place where, even before the city had elected an Irish mayor, Irish power, Irish-American power in the city could be expressed that way, and the ballpark was the place to do it.
There's 2 different type fans there, and you got the regular season fans, and you got the bleacher fans that Mrs. Yawkey said I shouldn't associate with because they're the riffraff of Boston.
Go Red Sox!
They care about the team. They want to win. I mean, we want to win. I want that big one. I want the big one. I want the big enchilada.
And they're very intimate. They can be awful mean, but they can be awful helpful on the mound.
To their defense, that they want to win. And
Every
hey,
day.
yeah, so do we. But hey, it's going to happen, and you got to, hang with us.
I came out and I had 2 big wads of cotton, and they started as soon as I came out there when you're warming up, throwing a ball and that. So I turned around to them and I took the cotton and I stuck it in my ear so they all could see it. And they all started cheering, and from that day on, they never bothered me again. I pulled the cotton out and they're still out there cheering. I think they wanted to see a little emotion from me, whereas I was always that non-emotional guy. And once I showed that emotion, it changed everything around.
Every time I enter the ballpark, there's an expectancy of seeing them win, you see. I don't go to see them lose.
I used to marvel. My last 2 or 3 years there, we had terrible teams. And you go out there on a Thursday afternoon. I remember the Yankees had 29,000 on a Thursday afternoon. I'd shake my head at them and, gosh, we had a terrible team, and yet they'd be out there.
Definitely rowdy, enthusiastic, die hard to their team until things start going badly.
If you can stick with the Red Sox, then you're definitely a Boston fan, because, one day it's going to be ours. Like, we're going to have the all-out victory.
You can hear the fans, you feel the fans. They are, they're very outgoing fans. They either love you or hate you. I mean, they want to love you, but if you don't do well, they start booing you.
It's an interesting loyalty. I mean, people really care about them. They care passionately about them, but they also fear that something bad's going to happen to them, and they're a little bit reluctant to embrace them too much because they've been burned so many times at the last minute.
From 60 on, never missed a game, for exception of maybe some sickness or anything. When my brother was dying with cancer and the Red Sox were in town, his last words that he said before he died, "I'm not going to die while the Red Sox are in town. You can still go see the games." 3 days later, after the Red Sox left town, he died.
Undyingly dedicated and loyal to the end.
Red Sox!
1904 brought a new owner, and 3 years later, a new name to Boston's team. The owner's name was General Charles Henry Taylor. Taylor owned the Boston Globe and a lot of land. He had been handpicked by American League President Ban Johnson, and he had enough money to outbid Mayor John F. Honey Fitzgerald. for a baseball team he decided to call the Boston Red Sox. Taylor's dream was to build Fenway Park on a huge tract of land his family owned in an area called the Fens, close to Kenmore Square. Ground was broken on September 25, 1911. By opening day, the park was only partially built. Bleacher seats were added by the 1912 World Series. And in a move that would make even a Steinbrenner blush, the general installed his son, John I. Taylor, as the club's clerk of the works, proving even then that bloodlines are often more important than baselines.
John I. Taylor resurrected himself somewhat by two acts. One, signing several good players from California, namely Harry Hooper and Duffy Lewis, and secondly, by deciding that he would build a new ballpark for the team. But as far as his on-the-field activities went, controlling the team, he was George Steinbrenner exponentially bad.
This is close to anything American as we really have. It naturally exists, even though it's man-made. And it exists in that world of baseball, that men playing a boys' game, and it's not, I just love that it's not perfect, but out of that comes its actual beauty.
There aren't any parks like this anymore. They tear them down. They got those old modern things, you know, all enclosed. Baseball was meant to be played outdoors, in the grass, in sunshine, with lights, whatever. It's meant to be an outdoor sport.
There's no other ballpark like it in all of America. There is no other ballpark that has the dimensions nor the eccentric character with the walls and the angles. I don't think there's any other ballpark that lets you get as close to the field now.
And once you stepped on that field, the closeness of the fans and the emotion of the fans at Fenway, it would just revive you. Like you're a new guy. Hey, let's go. Bring somebody on here. Let's play.
April 28th, 1912, opening day. The mayor of Boston, John F. Honey Fitzgerald, throws out the first ball at a brand new wonder of the baseball world, Fenway Park. 15,000 fans marvel at the electronic scoreboard. 18 turnstiles, plenty of seats, all within easy walking distance of trolley lines, too. But tragedy hangs in the afternoon air. 5 days earlier, the Titanic had struck an iceberg and, incredibly, been lost at sea. The ocean disaster dominated the news. Reports of the first game at the new park were relegated to back pages. For the record, Smokey Joe Wood, Tris Speaker, Duffy Lewis, Harry Hooper, and the rest of the Boston Nine won the game. The score was 7-6.
It was going to be the best club that they would see for years to come. Maybe the best club in Red Sox history.
In that first Fenway season, the hometown team went the distance, right into the World Series against the New York Giants, and beat them in 7 games. Boston was the world champion, something that became a regular event in the first few years at the new address, as the Red Sox repeated as champs in 1915, 1916, and 1918. Sometimes it seemed as if each day at the ballpark was one more page of history. On the 5th of September, 1912, 30,000 fans, an unheard of number, jammed Fenway to see Smokey Joe Wood go to the mound against Walter Johnson. Smokey Joe's season of 1912 was one for the ages. 34 wins, 3 World Series victories, for a total of 37 games won, against only 5 losses.
It's the first time that they ever had, as I understand it, people on the field. They had to rope them on the field, in the outfield, and the first base line and the third base line.
In 1915, his arm hurt, his career seemingly at an end. Smokey Joe Wood's days in Boston were over. Even with that season for the ages, though, he never made it to Cooperstown in the Hall of Fame, despite years of unsuccessful lobbying on his father's behalf by his son, Bob Wood.
He won 117 ball games and he lost 57. Now that means that he won better than 2 out of 3 ball games he ever pitched in the American League.
You come here and you feel the ghosts in the hallways. You know, once in a while I go up and I kiss this wall. I put on the back wall, I put my hands, and I get feelings. I mean, I'm there.
One of Babe's most unusual home runs. The Bambino slugs this one inside the park, races for the plate to beat the relay, and just hits the dirt before the ball. Wow, that was close.
If someone ever asked me if you could watch one performer one day in his career, you could somehow take a trip in a time machine, I would probably go back to July 11th, 1914, when Ruth, in his first day with the club, he'd just gotten off a train from Baltimore that morning at Back Bay Station. Met his future bride at a coffee shop. It's like a Hollywood movie. Comes into the clubhouse, Bill Carrigan's there to greet him, but he looks at Ruth and he says, "You're starting today." He won. It's the stuff of a legend, isn't it?
For 6 shining years, the Old Town team owned the greatest ball player ever to step between the lines of any park, anywhere, Babe Ruth, a larger-than-life figure who went on to become a cultural icon, an epic figure in the life of the land. But in 1920, the new owner of the Red Sox, desperately in need of cash to finance a Broadway play called No, No, Nanette, said yes, yes to Colonel Rupert, and the Babe Ruth, the most famous American of his time, was sold to the dreaded Yankees for $100,000, an act that would haunt the local franchise forever. The Babe would go on to be bigger than the Empire State Building, bigger than any president, more recognizable than kings, more approachable than a parish priest. As the Babe led the New Yorkers to 6 pennants through the Roaring '20s, the Boston Nine headed downhill faster than Hoover. By 1932, the Red Sox were drawing fewer than 200,000 fans. Billy Rogel, a member of those awful teams, is the oldest living Red Sox player.
Who likes to be in last place? But what are you going to do? We had a bunch of kids on the ball club. And me coming out of a Class D league into the majors was fantastic.
In those days when Billy Rogel was at shortstop and peered over his shoulder, all he saw was Duffy's Cliff, a 10-foot-high slope of land named in honor of all the balls caught there by his teammate Duffy Lewis. The bluff of grass disappeared in 1934 when a 37-foot-high wall with a 23-foot screen was constructed only a little more than 300 feet from home plate. The Green Monster was born. Baseball in Boston would never be the same.
When Fenway Park was first built, they never thought that anyone would be able to hit the ball over the wall.
When the wind was blowing out, it was a monster, I'd say. When the wind was blowing in, it was like a little lamb because it was hard to hit it.
When I came to Fenway Park, you know, the wall in those days, the first 20 feet was cement, and there was no padding or anything else. And you had to judge right away whether a ball was hit, whether it was going to hit the cement, because if it did, it's going to bounce back hard. Or if it hit the tin, then the ball was going to die.
Sometimes it would bounce left, sometimes it would be dead and drop straight down like a piece of mud, and other times it would hit the little ladder going up and bounce this way and that way, and there was a lot of character in it.
The monster is my baby. I can see it today when I sleep at night. I can see it. I want to hit it.
But in Fenway, anything can happen. You know, anybody with a bat can hurt you there because of the distance of the wall.
Twice a year, the wall gets hit with brushes rather than batted balls when it is painted by a company called Fenway Painters.
I suppose for someone to hit a baseball, it's a monster, but it's kind of nice to paint.
Through many of those years, the wall had a twin landmark in the old city service sign that lit the night sky from its perch high above Kenmore Square. In 1965, city service became Citgo, but the light still shines over Fenway.
And it really is a remnant of the past that people in Boston cherish and want to hold on to. And because of its location, it's become tied to Fenway Park, and there's no seeing or talking about one without the other.
Well, during batting practice one day, it was pretty funny. There was tons and tons of people out here waiting for balls to come over. Yeah, I think it might have been a Yankees game. And a ball hit up the wall behind me, went across the street, went right into the front seat of a car where a guy was sitting there reading the paper. And he didn't even know what was going on. About 40 people ran around the other side of the car, and somebody reached in and grabbed the ball out of his front seat and took off before the guy he really even knew what happened.
Like Chicago's Wrigley Field, Fenway Park still has a manual scoreboard located in the wall. The operators do not look forward to rain delays, as there are no bathrooms in the Green Monster. Over the years, players have signed their name inside the wall, only adding to its mystique.
This year we've had more people sign the wall than I think my previous 8 years combined. Well, Johnny Pesky's there, Jimmy Pearsall. Ted Williams is rumored to be back there. I haven't found it yet.
First time I walked into Fenway Park, I did have tears in my eyes because of the history of the park, and I love the games.
It's real different than other sports, I think. There's a universal appeal, young and old, male, female. It's a great sport.
That's the beauty of baseball, because it's an equalizer is what it is. The littlest guy can play this game.
This is his second game, actually. We went to another game this year, and this is his second game. He wants to keep on coming back.
If I didn't have baseball, I'd be one lost soul.
We really love to watch it because it has something to do with our childhood and something we can all be together about.
You walk in there and it's just a feeling of baseball is there. And it's beautiful.
In 1933, the Red Sox finished last, a mind-boggling 64 games behind the hated New York Yankees. The country wallowed in depression, but in Boston, the fear was that the local American League entry, averaging only 2,200 fans per game, might go the way of so many bank accounts. The Red Sox were bankrupt and for sale.
Well, this was the middle of the Depression. Tom Yawkey had somewhere probably at that time between $20 and $40 million. And Tom Yawkey walking into that room and saying he wanted to buy ball players was like somebody going into a bar and saying, boy, the drinks are on me.
Tom Yawkey was a young sportsman, cutting the mold of a Scott Fitzgerald character. He was a New York millionaire, an Ivy Leaguer with a ton of money and a love for baseball. As banks closed, Yawkey decided to open his wallet.
His project, the renovation of the ballpark, employed close to 2,000 union workers in the depths of the Depression.
He wanted the cleanest, neatest, most beautiful little park in the majors, and they had it here.
He was always a gentleman, never demanded anything, because actually we were selling goods without being licensed.
I think of the khaki pants and the khaki shorts, and he had a chauffeur-driven Blazer, you know, and he would come to the ballpark. And I remember when Bernie Carbo told him, could you go get me a couple of hot dogs? I'm hungry before the game. And Mr. Yawkey went and got him a couple of hot dogs, you know.
Yawkey wanted to win, and he didn't mind paying for his victories either. In October 1934, he shocked the sports world by paying Joe Cronin $25,000 to play shortstop. At the time of the deal, Cronin was the son-in-law of the owner of the Washington Senators, Calvin Griffith. Once he arrived in Boston, though, Yawkey made him the manager as well.
So I think he always felt as a ball player that it was kind of difficult to do both. And I think that's why we've seen that it hasn't been continued, because it is very difficult for one person to do both.
When the Red Sox were having a slump one time and losing a lot of games, and I remember after dinner I was out in the front lawn sprinkling the lawn, and there's a boathouse at the other end of the street, and the kids used to delight in coming by, and they'd yell things to me about the Red Sox, you know. So one night they went back and they yelled to me, "The Red Sox stink." And I just yelled back, "You're telling me."
Still, money could not guarantee victory over the longest of sports seasons. By 1937, General Manager Eddie Collins was assigned the job of acquiring the kind of player who could make a difference.
And millions of fans again ask, what makes Ted Williams the greatest hitter of our times? Has Ted any of his magic with the bat? Back he came with his superb timing and terrific power.
He's the most competent guy I've ever met in my life. Whatever he did, he was the best at it because he worked at it and studied it and had a very curious mind, wanted to be really good at whatever he did.
You could always tell when he was going to hit a home run. You expected him to do it, you see. And he expected to hit them as well.
We put the uniform on that day. He gave you 100%, and we loved him for that. He was going down in history as the greatest hitter, and he did.
Williams was, you can't say enough about what when he had a bat in his hand, it was like Arthur Fiedler leading the Boston Pops.
Of all the baseball gods who ever played the game, none swung a bat better than number 9, Theodore Samuel Williams, the Kid, the splendid splinter. He arrived for good in Fenway in 1939, a young, raw-boned, handsome son of a Salvation Army woman from San Diego. His swing, his stance, his many moods, and all his achievements defined the Red Sox for 2 decades. From 1939 through 1960, Teddy Ballgame hit for a .344 lifetime average, 521 home runs, 1,839 runs batted in.
Williams wallops a tremendous drive into the center field bleachers. A home run for the 3rd tally of the game.
It was just, God was great to him, gave him great eyesight, great body, and he worked at it too. I used to see him when we stayed over, when we were kids over on Bay State Road. He had a mirror on the wall, and he had a heavy bat. He'd swing at it. He'd take 15, 20 swings. He'd set it down, pick it up, another 15, 10. He'd give himself situations. Well, we're in Detroit. The old kid is up there. 2 men on, game's on the line, and pow! And he'd do that in batting practice.
It's a line drive over second. It's streaking into deep center field. Ted gallops to second. As Penske rounds third. Score, Johnny, score! Ted highballs it for third. He skids desperately into the bag. And he's safe.
In his 3rd season, 1941, while America was distracted by the winds of war and Joe DiMaggio was hitting safely in 56 consecutive games, Ted Williams hit .406, the last player ever to break that immortal barrier.
When you really kiss one, I think that really is woof. That's it. Or a real important hit against a tough pitcher that you know is tough for you, and bam, you did it.
On June 9th, 1946, a Williams home run became the longest ball ever hit in Fenway Park history. Today, a red seat in the bleachers marks the exact spot where the baseball landed, 502 feet from home.
It was section 42, row 37, C21. Well, so sitting way out there, my great-grandfather, he felt pretty safe. Well, moments later, he gets hit smack dab in the middle of the head with Ted Williams' home run. And it punched, he had a straw hat on, and it punched a hole right in the middle of the straw hat.
He just happened to catch the fastball at the right timing, and everything worked perfectly. It was in symmetry. It was like poetry in motion.
He's sitting there saying, how far away from home plate do you need to sit to be safe in this park? You know, but with Ted Williams, you never know.
Fenway Park was also home ground for Leslie Jones, a photographer with the Old Boston Herald. For nearly 50 years, Jones was there to record the daily comings and goings of the Old Town team, and especially of Ted Williams.
Back in those days, they actually allowed the photographers on the field.
And you could bet at any given time that he would be in the lead, always testing how far he could go before the umpire or somebody would call him back.
So I'm really not sure if it was actually the sport or I think the photography. The sport of photography, I think, was what really drew him.
A near-record crowd turns out at Fenway Park to watch.
In 1946, the Red Sox won the pennant before losing the World Series to the St. Louis Cardinals in 7 games. In 1948, they tied for first with the Indians before losing a 1-game playoff. In 1949, the Yankees broke the hearts of all New Englanders in the final weekend of the season, taking the pennant from the hometown lads, perennial runner-ups. Through it all, the nature and color of America's pastime was changing. Jackie Robinson broke the color line. The game, the country itself, would never be the same. It would be many more years, 1959, before the Red Sox put their first black ball player on the turf at Fenway Park, Pumpsie Green. Through the 1950s, the Red Sox wallowed in mediocrity as well as 4th place. They had stars, a homegrown Walt Dropo, and an ill-fated Harry Aganis, who seemed to be the answer at first base until he died in June of 1954. But down the turnpike, the Yankees could not stop winning. And then, on September 28, 1960, an era ended when Ted Williams, 42 years old, stepped into the batter's box at Fenway Park for the last time. Home run number 521.
It hasn't been like this, always. There have been leaner years by far.
All baseball in Boston is measured by the time before and after Williams. His shadow looms large. In the spring of 1961, a young man from Notre Dame in the potato fields of Long Island stood in the left field spot made so famous by number 9. He wore number 8. His name was Carl Yastrzemski, and he came to play.
Hughes fires another pitch, and this time Yaz doesn't miss. He connects so solidly, everybody in the park knows it's gone.
There was not much else around him. There was Dick Raditz, perhaps the greatest relief pitcher of his era. There was a young Rico Petrocelli and an even younger local lad, Tony Conigliaro, and a pretty good-looking pitching prospect named Jim Lonborg. Other than that, hope was not much in evidence until a new manager, Dick Williams, was hired and announced quite confidently at the start of the 1967 season that the Red Sox would win more than they lost. 1967 was a season for the ages, a year that saw the rebirth of baseball in Boston, the year of the impossible dream.
Charging onto the field, eager for a victory that would square the suit.
I think all of New England was revived in '67.
Yaz scooping up the ball like an infielder.
Sharing the outfield at Fenway, Yaz led the Old Town team to the fulfillment of an impossible dream, despite the nightmare that occurred one sultry August night.
I heard the crack. I will never forget it. Never in my life. I thought he was dead.
Until that dreadful moment, Tony Conigliaro seemed to have the potential to be as great a player as Yaz. He had more home runs earlier in his career than almost anyone who ever played.
This guy was going to be one of the best home run hitters that probably in Fenway Ballpark.
Everyone just held their breath. And he didn't move for over 5 minutes.
He had grown up in Greater Boston, played in the shadow of Fenway as a kid, and now, a certified major league star, he was badly injured and out of the lineup for the remainder of a most spectacular season.
The best year he had with the Red Sox, he had 36 home runs and 116 runs batted.
He stood on top of the plate. He challenged pitchers to pitch him inside, and there were a lot of pitchers in those days who
accepted the challenge.
He missed all of 1968, made a comeback in '69, hit 20 home runs, and incredibly, another 36 in 1970. But his eyesight was deteriorating, his skills diminished, and within a year, he was finished.
I mean, it wasn't intentional to hit him in the head, but it was definitely thrown at him. Tony never ever complained or never said that, why me? He never complained.
Ironically, Tony C. made one last attempt to play in 1975, the year that Boston brought baseball back to the country with a marvelous World Series that ranks with the best ever played.
6 runs, 14 hits, no errors. For Cincinnati, 6 runs, 9 hits, 1 error for Boston.
Despite the fact the Cincinnati Reds won the title, the series culminated with one swing of his bat, an electrifying game-winning home run. Carlton Fisk and the Red Sox had returned America's pastime to its owners, a new generation of baseball fans. After 1975, it seemed as if there was the foundation of a dynasty. They nearly won in '77, were ahead throughout '78, and ended by tying the Yankees and forcing a one-game playoff that burns forever in the minds of Red Sox fans because of one moment and one man, Bucky Dent.
I never saw the ball go in the net, and the one thing that I do remember as far as running around was when I touched third base, how quiet the ballpark got, how eerie feeling it was.
You know, I thought I had to play off the wall easily. And when the ball went into the net, you know, you can see it on the films, I kind of just almost sunk to the ground. It was like something, everything was taken out of you.
We wanted to give the kids and the people that come here to play the actual feeling of what it's like to see the monster, and if they ever hit one over, to get that same kind of feeling that I had in 1978.
On that distant October afternoon, Red Sox Nation felt just a little bit older as the captain, number 8, Carl Yastrzemski, waved goodbye to a place and people after more than 2 decades of performance. In 1986, the Old Town team was 1 out away from its first World Series title since the early part of the century. Champagne was on ice, Bill Buckner was on first. Yet now, at the conclusion of a century, the Old Town team is as it was at the start, proud and optimistic. The game itself, the one that takes place between the lines every day, across the longest of seasons, remains unchanged, and so do our hopes.
This place deserves to have a history. I mean, this is a monument. This is like the temple. So many places they're just taking landmarks and just tearing them down. I mean, what would we be like if they removed the pyramids? And this is part of our culture, world culture.
In its 9 decades of existence, Fenway has harbored the dreams, the cheers, and the tears of all New England. Along with its baseball, it has been home to professional football, as well as local college teams. It's been used by priests and politicians and even presidents as a place to preach or pray or attempt to persuade. Like Bunker Hill and Paul Revere's house, it is a landmark, a legend, and its legacy belongs to all of us and always will.
I guess the one word you can say about it, it's a charmer. It's a real charmer.
Fenway is what it is because of the people that came through that place.
Sometimes you wonder what it would be like if they ever win. You know, is that mystique going to be gone in Fenway? You know, is it going to be there?
baseball in New England is it's the sport that crosses over more barriers, boundaries, and just into more demographic groups. Old people like baseball, little kids like baseball.
I've been coming here for 50 years, and I've been in most of the major league ballparks, and this one really has the ambience, the feel of baseball more than any of the other parks.
You pass it on to your children, the disease of thinking the Red Sox will win it someday.
I mean, this place is filled, whether the Red Sox are doing well or not. I think it's just a part of Boston.
It's family. You saw children in there that was under 6 months old. Then you saw someone is celebrating their 97th birthday today.
Tradition. It's just tradition. It's history. A sense of place.
The fact that you go from your seat down to get a hot dog and you have to go through this tremendous crowd. I think that's part of the tradition.
Scorecard, red card, one ball, chip outside the ballpark, guys. Pay the fever here, guys. Today's program, $1. Scorecard.
It's a cozy little place to go to. The best ballpark in the country to watch a ball game, because you're right where the action is.
At the end of the season, I used to get an awful lot of mail, and Ned Martin, who worked with me, did as well, from people who said, you were a visitor in my home all summer long, all through the days and nights of summer, and we were into it. And I think there's the continuity of the day in, day out of the game that makes it a very special thing.
We need a new stadium. We do. But don't take, you got to infuse the old with the new and try to make it a place that is warm, friendly, and someplace where we can win another pennant.
When you come into Fenway Park, it's like going into your living room with your slippers and your robe on, and you're watching the grass, beautiful grass. Of course, you can't see it grow, of course, but the memories there. So many things go through your mind when you go there. Seeing Williams swing the bat, seeing Clemens throw all those strikeouts, watching Martinez. Those are the things I think about. This is what Fenway Park is to me.
So when you drive into the parking lot of Fenway Park, the horseman on the street, hey, yeah, how are you? And the guy parking your car, it was like all family. Peanut vendor would come over, you want a bag of peanut and stuff, guy selling popcorn on the street, you want a bag of popcorn? It was family.
It's 2 foot shorter than the original one in Boston, because it would have cost us, I don't know how much more money just to go up 2 more feet. So we felt the feeling would be there at 35 foot instead of 37 foot. But you know, the dimensions are the same. It's, you know, 315 down the line. We painted the scoreboard, and we froze my home run in time to the 7th inning, and it's the same length as far as the scoreboard in Boston. We tried to make it as realistic as possible as far as, you know, that day, that moment. Guidry against Torres, froze my home run in the 7th inning, 3-2, 5 hits, no runs. I just understand, my partner took me to lunch last week and told me that the bat sold for $64,000 in an auction, and I've often wondered myself where the bat went, and until last week, I didn't know where it was at.
And when I stepped into Fenway Park the first day, I thought it had to be Ted Williams. And for 2 or 3 months, I tried to hit home runs, and I wasn't a home run hitter at that time in the minor leagues. I had just turned 21 when I came up with the Red Sox. I was more of a line drive hitter. And I struggled the first 2.5, 3 months. I can never forget, we played in Detroit. Mike Higgins was the manager at that time. And Mike came up to me and he said, "You're my left fielder, don't worry about it. But remember one thing," he says, "you're not Ted Williams. Don't try to be Ted Williams, be yourself." And from then on, the second half of the season, I hit over 300 and established myself. You know, stepping in his shadow almost ruined my career.
So the gray, cold day, 300,000 were at that game, you know. At least they all told me they were. They had about 10 or 11,000 there. So I went out to get the morning paper, come in and have breakfast, and I didn't have much to say. And my wife, Jerry, says, "What's the matter with you?" I said, "Well, you know, this is Ted's last game." I said, we'll have him here at home. And I said, "Boy, he's given me a lot of excitement to broadcast. We haven't had a pennant winner, but he's been great to work with." And I said, "I'm going to miss him." And so I got in the car and went into the game. As I went through the clubhouse, Johnny Orlando, the clubhouse boy, grabbed me. "Come here, I want to talk to you." He said, "Listen, this is Ted's last game ever." Well, I said, "He's got 2 in New York." No, he said, "He's gone to Mr. Yaki in Cronin, and he's got it." When he went to Korea, he came back with a funny bug. He'd get a chest thing every year, late in the summer. And he said his chest is bothering him, and so they've told him to play today and forget about it. This is his last game, but don't say anything to anybody. I said, "Don't worry, I won't." So he came up, and the last time he nearly hit a home run. Hit a long fly to right. Now he comes up, and then Jack Fisher's pitching, and he hits this long drive up in the right field. And it's in there for a home run. As he rounds the bases around first, I said, "And Ted Williams has hit a home run in his last time at bat in the major leagues." I wasn't supposed to say anything. You know, I was so excited and so caught up in it, and so I spilled the beans on that.
The first time I came from Pittsfield, I drove right by it down the turnpike, and there are the lights and the green monster. And I go down and I said, "Well, I'll take a right and a right, and it'll come right back to Fenway Park." I take a right and a right, and I end up in Cambridge. And I'm going, "Wait a second." And I said, "Well, it's right there. I'll go over there and take a right." And I take a right, and I end up over in Brookline, you know, and I missed the park altogether. And then finally, you go, "Where you park your car?" And there's this little place, and you go through a little gate. And the guy gets out and wedges it through, and then you walk through looks like a cellar, and it's musty and it smells, and then you walk down a little plywood ramp, and you come into this clubhouse. It's really a bandbox, and it just smells like a ballpark. It's great, and you know, it's something about it that I always liked. Even when I first saw it, you know, being from California, I like things new and pristine and new highways, but Fenway was just really quaint. It was very comfortable. Then you walk through the tunnel and you come out into this field, and it's just such a minimal space, you know, in a little area. There's no wasted anything. You know, every little nook and cranny has a purpose.